Everyone. It is 6:39, and we're going to call the first public hearing to order, Chapter 62, amending the Code of the Borough of Westchester, Chapter 62, titled Garbage, Rubbish, and Refuge, to amend Section 62(1) to add definitions of dwelling unit and toter. Section 62(3) to amend certain disposal regulations that apply to public and private collection. Section 62(4) to amend certain public collection regulations. Section 62(8) to amend certain private collection regulations. Section 62(9) to reference toters and dumpsters. Section 62(11) to revise the regulations for dumpsters. And Section 62(12) to require containers used for recycling to be stored in the same locations as toters and dumpsters.
Thank you. This is a public hearing because it's an amendment to one chapter of your code, specifically 62, titled Garbage, Rubbish, and Refuse. This council, one of the council committees, I guess, felt that there were definitely some things that needed to be changed as far as your trash regulations. Took a very comprehensive look at Chapter 62, worked closely with Don Edwards. I was then given what the council committee had asked to change, and I put that into the ordinance format. Chapter 62 today, without these amendments, is sort of, the regulations are a little bit all over the place. As new regulations came in, they were sort of put into different sections. So the goal was to try to make it more reader friendly, to be honest, as far as what are the general regulations that apply to everybody? What are the regulations that apply if you get your trash collected from the borough? What are the regulations that if you are required, at what minimum level are you required to have a private hauler? And then what are the regulations for that private hauler? And then there was your dumpster section today is not clear on, is it a dumpster just for somebody that's doing construction at their home? So we tried to make that clearer. We did advertise tonight's hearing in the Daily Local News on March 11th, and I sent a copy of the ordinance to the Daily Local and Chester County Law Library. So those are the only procedural requirements that we had to do. Committee, again, really worked on this, gave, with Don's help, gave me the ideas of what to put in here. So I didn't necessarily make this up. This was coming from the committee. I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, it's really to address some of the issues with where trash receptacles are being stored on property, whether the lids are, appropriately put onto the container. I think you increased, or you added a rule as to, there was an issue with rooming houses or rental properties that had so many toters and so many trash cans. We're trying to indicate that now they have to have a minimum one container basically that can handle all of that trash. So a lot of different changes were made. Don't know if anyone has any specific questions, but that's the summary of why this is before you.
Thank you. I know committee spent quite a number of months on this. Any comments?
Initially, when we started this project, it all started out by going in the different wards and looking at rooming houses and student homes and apartment buildings to see exactly how they were handling the trash, because most of the time I walk around town and pick the trash up because it blows all over the place. My first trip was down the southeast, and I stumbled upon a property that had 18 45-gallon totes behind their garage. And the next door had 9. And then I just kept going down the alley and I just kept shaking my head. How the heck do you have this much trash, but you can pick your trash up twice a week? And you have these many cans. I opened the cans and it looked like they only empty half of them. I started speaking with some of our council members and say, look, we need to look at Chapter 62 to see if we can refine what type of trash cans we would prefer to have, how often they can be picked up. This is for private pickup, not public pickup. And we spent 8 months on this, trying to come up with a legitimate way, trying to define what a trash can is, what a dumpster is, what is a 35-gallon for residential, what is a 96 for commercial. So there's a lot of intense work in this. You know, it's amazing when you say dumpster, people really don't even know what a dumpster is until you really show them, or a tote. They see these big ass trash cans around the borough. If you're a homeowner, you have two 35-gallon trash cans and as many recycling cans as you want. The apartment buildings have abused the system to a point because there was no guidelines. What this chapter 62 rewrite did was it put guidelines of how many you could have, reasonably have, and then how far they have to be away from the alley. Because we have some residents that leave their 45-gallon totes on the curb all week long instead of pulling it in, pulling it out. Or they leave it on their front lawn because it's easier just to leave it there and just fill it. They don't seem to mind. But what's happened in Westchester Borough, the alleys have become the residences' streets. The highways, High Street, Gay Street, Church Street, they're the people that drive through the town. Because if you live in the town, you know that you get caught on Market Street and you can sit there for 40 minutes sometimes trying to get from the courthouse all the way to the other side of town. So the residents, we all drive basically in the alleys because we know how to get across town without any hassle. And what's happening is that the toters are actually staying, or they're in the alley. They're in the alleys and you have to drive around them. So that's why 62 was rewritten with a lot of help from everybody on council and the solicitors. And if the ordinance passes, we've agreed to go to the Apartment Owners Association, sit down with them, explain the new rules to them so they know exactly what's going on and what's expected, so they don't have to worry about hearing it down the street. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have one question. I don't mean to be like Bill Clinton, asking the definition of is, but it says amend certain private collections. And then certain public collection regulations. What defines as
Meaning,
certain?
so rather than call out every change, a lot of this is just being carried over from your existing sections. In fact, because we just rewrote that paragraph that today has private regulations, public regulations, a lot of those were not changing. So I didn't want to say changing every regulation that relates to private haulers, changing every regulations that relates to people that get public collection. There were specified ones that were revised. That's why in the title, meaning certain, was we weren't changing everything. So for example, right now in chapter 62, you have 62-3, which is just called disposal regulations. But that, to me, had private and public and ones that applied to both. So those now, 62-3 is just more the general, everybody has to adhere to. And then the new 62-4 is anything that's public collection. So who's required to have their trash collected by the borough and what are the rules that are in place for people that get public collection. 62-8 is where the private collection regulations are. Some of those are already in your code, but this is now compiling them all into this section. So this is, if you're required to use a private hauler, these are the rules that apply to you. So we just tried to make it more clear as to general that applies to everybody, public regulations and private regulations. But a lot of these are carried over from the existing chapter 62. Not all of them have been changed.
Other comments? Okay, open up to public comments.
Darrell Cook, South Walnut Street. Could we have the ordinance read for those that don't have access to Word? Thank you.
Read out the entire ordinance.
Section 4B states 3 cubic yards. So this ordinance would outlaw all the 2 cubic yard dumpsters that are in the borough?
No.
That's not what that means.
As Mr. Flynn said, there are properties that had 18 containers. So the goal is that if your property has more, if it generates more than 4 96-gallon toters per week, instead of having toters, you're supposed to now have a dumpster with a minimum capacity of 3 cubic yards. So it's to get rid of the 18 trash cans out in the alleyway and instead to have it be in a dumpster with a minimum capacity of 3 cubic yards. That's the goal of that section.
The way the
That-
math works is if you had 18 96-gallon toters, you would have 3 3-yard dumpsters.
I don't see 18 in here anywhere. B, the equivalent of 4 96-gallon toters per week and 3 cubic yards provided by the owner. So the Justice Center with the 2 cubic yard dumpsters would be required to replace them with a 3 cubic yard dumpster, same as the property on South Church Street that has a nicely screened area with 2 cubic yard dumpsters. They would be required to replace it with a capacity of 3 cubic yards. If
I don't think that's true, only because it says a property which generates more than the equivalent of 4 96-gallon toters. So I think, please call me out if I'm saying something wrong. I think that because we're calling out the toters here, more than that, we're generating more than that. You're talking about a place that is not generating more than that. They just happen to have a 2 cubic yard dumpster. Am I wrong?
I think you're right, but the ordinance states 3 cubic yards. It does not state 2 cubic yards are legal anywhere.
But it starts with a property which generates more than this is required to have a 3 cubic yard. But you're describing a property which does not.
I don't know how much the Justice Center garage creates. I don't know what South Church Street creates, but they've both got 2 cubic yard dumpsters. One trash, one recycle.
I don't think that's more than the equivalent of 4 96-gallon toters. Am I wrong?
I guess it depends on how often they're collected each week.
I see nowhere where 2 cubic yards are legal in this. I'm opposed to dumpsters. I think they take up parking spaces, and I'm opposed to anything that takes out parking in Westchester. Thank you.
I guess his point is that if there's a current property today that has a dumpster, but it's less than 3 cubic yards, is the intention to go to that property owner, maybe it was the county, and say, you need to replace your 2 cubic yard dumpster and now have a minimum 3 cubic yard dumpster? That's his question. I don't think that was the intention, but maybe it's something that we need to account for to say that existing properties utilizing dumpsters, with approval of the Public Works Director can continue. I mean, I'm not sure we thought that through. I think it was more, the goal was, again, as Mr. Flynn indicated, multifamilies, properties where there weren't any dumpsters and there were just multiple trash cans sort of every which way. That was the intention.
Yeah, I would say the intention was not allowing the toters to proliferate and multiply. And at some point, there's a conversion factor of 4. Greater than 4 96 gallons would mean that you would have to have a 3-yard dumpster if you had more than 4 toters. If you have 2 2-yard dumpsters, that's still within the same amount of trash allowable, but we're trying to control the number of containers. I don't know, Don, do you have a comment on any of this? We worked through this for quite a long time.
Yeah. I guess my first thought is, I don't know that dumpsters are purchased. Okay, so if someone has a 2 cubic yard dumpster, I think all they would do is call whoever's picking up the trash and say, please swap this out with a 3 cubic yard one. So I would not assume that they're purchased. And I don't know that it's that much of a hardship to go from 2 to 3. The second thing is, I think we've got a nice mechanism in this ordinance to address certain issues, hardships and things like that. And so I think we all knew that we were going to have to work things out, and nothing, everything wasn't going to be clean, no pun intended, as far as dealing with the trash once we pass this and move forward. So, there is that we can work things out. And I pledged to work things out with the residents as best we can, so it's good for everybody, to not create hardships.
Maybe we could scroll to that paragraph that talks about the procedures that Don's referring to about,
It's 62.8D, but that's specific to the fencing and screening requirements. So one of the thoughts is that maybe you sort of take that language that gives the Director of Public Works this ability to work with the property owner and deal with their specific situation and make it broader to apply to maybe other regulations in the ordinance, not just the fencing and the screening. That's one thought.
Mr. Metric.
I do remember this conversation about 4 toters of 96 gallons each. And it came down to a math problem. So I quick did it again. 496 toters generates about 384 gallons. There's about 200 gallons per cubic yard. So if you're going to generate more than 384 gallons, you're right up to the limit of what a 2 cubic yard dumpster can hold. So I think that's why we went with the next size up. Because if you're generating more than 384 gallons per week of trash, you're almost filling you're going to fill an entire 2 cubic yard dumpster, maybe more. We don't want it overflowing. I remember that conversation. That's why we put 3 in.
That was the conversation. 4 96-gallon toters was approximately equal to the 2-yard limit before you convert to a dumpster. That's why we said 3 yards if you have more than 4 toters.
I just don't see that being a hardship.
Thank you.
So then we're saying for people who have a 2-yard dumpster, like Darrell has mentioned, that is something that can be settled with you? Is that?
Not as written, we'd have to do a rewrite.
Yeah. I think we could add language to that. And I don't think that if that's the only change you're going to make, I don't think we need to go and re-advertise this. I think I can add that flexibility into a section because you are when it's not zoning or subdivision land development ordinances, you have, if it's not a major modification of the ordinance, you can instruct that change be made and still move forward to adopt it. That's one option. If there are other changes that, kick it over and they seem to be substantive changes or you'd like to see it again, then you could always continue the hearing, can make those changes and bring it back to you at a future date. That's an option as well.
I'd like to add one more thing, which is, once this is passed, is there going to be a grace period, for people to get into compliance? I would think that we'd want that. I don't know that we have anything in there for that, but
Well, there is one way to handle that. So right now, under the Home Rule Charter, all ordinances become effective 31 days after enactment. You could change that. You could make that be 6 months after enactment or 3 months after. I know that with some of the plastic bag bans, they did that to get the word out, give property owners an opportunity to learn what the ordinance said. So that's an option as well. You could change the effective date to be somewhere in the future.
Thank you.
I think this one, because of the amount of changes and the number of people it potentially could affect, we do need a good amount of runway and some communications, even if that's flyers or definitely website banners and emails and so on and so forth, because this is something that has not been has had a whole lot of change. You know, it's had a few things. The biggest change I think that we made was recycling. That was a long time ago. And maybe putting cigarette butts in empty containers or something.
Yeah, when this ordinance was actually written back in the day, they didn't use the word toter because they didn't exist. So the toter became extremely easy to use for the large trash haulers. If you live out in the country, they have very large 96-gallon trash cans or toters that they pull out, and they do it because they don't come back that often. But the word toter was not even in the ordinance because it wasn't even thought of at that time.
Okay, additional public comments?
Ann Carroll, 506 South Franklin Street, speaking for myself and also as chairperson of CASE Civic Action Southeast, with some concerns that CASE members have related to me, including Daryl. And I have a visual that I think, because I have several issues or questions that Jeff can pull up if he is permitted to do so. And then you'll at least know where I'm talking about. Okay, thank you. The first thing is that toter is a term that is used throughout the changes that are being made by this. And the definition seems to outlaw or ignore cans that do not have wheels, because toters is this definition. And our citizens currently do put out their trash in heavy molded plastic containers without wheels. In some cases, they've gone and bought lids for them when we started really enforcing the lidded part. So my question is, did you intend to eliminate that and make everybody buy new trash cans? And if not, we need to fix that.
Want me to comment as you go?
It would be helpful that we know.
Okay, so for residential, you're allowed to have two 35-gallon trash cans for residential. They could either be round trash cans with a lid, or
Okay.
it could be a toter.
I'm sorry, I need to interrupt you because that's not what the rest of the ordinance says. It all relates to toters. So if you have
We're basically talking about public primary outside pickup.
okay, let me show you where it rolls.
Are you okay if the toter doesn't have wheels? And if so, we'll
Yes,
strike the
we're
word
okay
wheels.
with traditional 35.
So we'll get
gallon.
rid of the word wheels.
Okay.
That one's simple, right?
Cool.
Yes, that's been asked before. We talked about it. We would like to see eventually everybody, when they're
Right.
replacing them, moving to the newer style
I
toters.
didn't think you did, but then that's why you'll see as we go along, the word toters is circled everywhere. So now we don't have to address toters anymore. The first box at the top of this page, you say it has to, not provide food for rodents. I would suggest attract insects, rodents, or other scavengers or varmints. I looked up the definition of rodents. It does not include raccoons, foxes. Sorry, I did look up the definition. And in ordinances, your definition defaults to a dictionary definition. So, I don't know how you feel about
I mean, again, a lot of these, and I'm not making excuses, but some of this language is carried up. Every section was not changed. So this was one, the language wasn't changed. I have no objection. It's up to the council if they want to expand it. It seems fair to me.
Okay. I'm just being ordinance minded. I did this for years, so I try to look at all those things. Okay, toters. And down here, it says all properties which generate two. I'm just saying it's a maximum of two or at most two, just for clarity. I don't know that anyone cares. Anybody?
I don't think we changed anything there. That was already there.
Well, I just think that's more clear that you're allowed a maximum of
You're
two.
definitely going for clarity, so.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay.
I have a problem with that.
And this language, I think, may have also existed before, the equivalent of 2. That, to a mathematician, says you could have 4 as long as they add up to 235. So I would suggest you eliminate that language, which generate more than 2. So you have at most 2, and then you have more than 2. We have 1 yes. Everybody okay?
I
Good.
ask a question of our solicitor real quick? Are these material changes or can you make?
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be my
I-
next question. I mean, we could be here for an hour. If there's something substantive that it's going to be, then we can take it back to committee and redo it rather than spending an hour here.
Well, if you, I mean, you tell me when, it won't take that long. On the next page, once a week, everything else says per. That's easy. Toters. See, I'm on, where'd you go, Joe? I'm on the top of page 3. Part B, right, easy. The bottom of part C, the comment there. Now, this may be substantive, or it's a question. Disposal bags are our blue, you purchase them bags. Is that correct? Therefore, if you place them outside, are they varmint proof? So that is why I have written this sentence. Disposal bags shall not be placed outside the dwelling unit until, or building, you could say outside the building enclosure, whatever, until the time specified prior to collection day. In our neighborhoods, which you're trying to address, the students will have their 2, and then they'll have 2, 3, 4 blue bags sitting out in the yard. Boom, there it is.
I think that G covers that though, doesn't it? Are you worried about when they're putting it out? Because I feel like G is covering that.
What part?
Toters shall not be set out earlier than 6 PM of the day preceding
That's,
collection.
no, that's setting it out at the curb.
So I'm not following what your concern in C is. You don't even want it outside the dwelling.
C
No.
is how you store your rubbish. So when you store it in your yard, which is addressed later, when you store it in your yard, are you allowed to store 4 blue bags in your yard?
Well, I mean, it says a disposal bag shall be set out on a collection day outside of a sealed toter. I mean, you could read that to say that that's when it's allowed to be set out. It's not
No,
allowed-
but your trash cans are stored in your yard, and you're allowed to have 2 trash cans and 4 bags. Nowhere does it say that we're going to treat your trash cans differently from your bags. The part you're referencing is when they can be set out at the curb.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Thank you.
Similar to the yard waste, like you're not really supposed to have your yard waste out for yard waste collection. I got it. So the answer is no. I don't know that that needs to be clear here. Yeah, I think it's covered.
Okay. D, the same language should apply, weatherproof, varmint-proof, and insect-proof, as opposed to just rat-proof. I'm worried about raccoons, foxes, which we have in our neighborhood now. The street address, I would suggest house number, street, and unit when applicable, because on the private properties that don't require private haulers, the units are different, and so it would help the landlord actually determine who's being a scofflaw or not treating their trash can well.
But Ann, isn't that part of their street address, what unit they are? I mean, that's your, I guess to be more clear, that's fine. Yeah, that's
I'm
fine.
just clarifying, then
Yeah.
I think it's clarifying.
That's fine. I mean, if I'm saying that's fine, it's ultimately council's decision. So if I'm saying it's fine, you guys disagree, please jump in.
Can you just make the suggestion again so I'm understanding what you're asking for?
She wants to make sure that instead of just saying street address, you say street address, house number, and unit number when applicable. So if there's a multifamily that has 213 East Minor, Unit A or Unit 1A, that the toter has that on it, not just street, but the
We
actual unit
don't
number.
do that currently.
I'm wondering if some places share though, like it doesn't matter what.
That's why I put when applicable. Because if they're sharing the trash cans, it would not be applicable. But if they each get a trash can according to their, there's only 2 units in the building, that's when applicable. Just a suggestion. I'm not wedded to it, but I don't think it's a problem. The language in F I thought was confusing, the highlighted language. So I suggested alternative language, which just, I believe, clarifies it. I don't think it makes a substantive difference. G, I guess that's up to, in other words, garbage that is undrained, unwrapped, or improperly contained. So the garbage is drainy stuff. Or rubbish and refuse. Oh, this was not addressed, sorry. Rubbish or refuse mixed with recyclables as defined in this ordinance.
That happens all the time, and you're going to have a lot of bags you're not collecting then. I would
well-
venture to guess.
We do.
Yeah, and that's up to council. Then are you going to have those bags sitting there because they didn't properly?
Under our previous situation where we had a person in Public Works who was dedicated half to trees and half to trash. The old guys remember this. That person went around and looked for people who were throwing a beer can party, and all their pizza boxes and their beer cans went in the trash. That costs us. That's a cost to us. So that is my suggestion. Whether it's substantive is up to your solicitor. G,
It's a substantive because that's a change in
I feel
terms
like
of
that's covered in the
enforcement.
recycling section though.
it is in the recycling section, so all you're doing really is repeating it here, I believe. So that's why I quoted 6212C. So yes, it is there, but
Well, no, there's a requirement that you recycle. It doesn't anywhere say that if you have a bag that has a mixed garbage and recycling, it won't be collected. She's adding the concept that the trash hauler is going to actually examine and see that there are recycling in the
Oh.
bag or in the toter, and therefore it's not being collected. That's not stated in the recycling part.
no,
And that
when
I would say
you're
is a
right.
substantive change.
You're right. I'm sorry. Yes, it was the definition of the recyclables that's in that section. G, I would only ask that you change the 6 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the winter time. If I can't put my trash out to the curb and it's dark, I mean, I'm pulling it out from the backyard in the dark. It's not a big deal. I would suggest where you have the highlighted stored, removed from the collection site and stored, just for clarity's purposes. And then I have a question, which may or may not, if you do it, it would be a substantive change. Why can non-removal after collection not be ticketed or addressed in the same way as snow removal? Because those cans that sit on the sidewalk and blow around are a hazard to pedestrians, handicapped individuals, etc. It is no different from snow and ice. I've been asking for this for years. If we're going to do it, now's the time to do it. And it would mirror the language that is in the provision 9521A and B. So that's a,
Wouldn't that be for our codes
Yeah,
department? to
and
enforce?
that's already in the code section.
It is. It's in 6214D.
Yeah, it's already in the code
It's in-
section. It's just that over the past year, we didn't have enough sneakers to get around and take care of all that. Like, for example, and I'm going to call it out.
that's okay. I
I'm
gotcha.
going to call it out, the corner of North Church and West Marshall Street. There's 4 45-gallon toters that have been sitting there for a year and a half. And we've been giving them tickets and the toters are still sitting there.
Okay.
So I don't know what you do other than take them. So,
I
Okay.
think 6214 already does have the same procedure as for ice and snow.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
sure.
Thank you. My fault. In number one on the next page, streets, I- I would prefer to say right of ways, because streets means, you're driving down the car, you're driving and you can't see it. Well, I'm walking and I can see it. Not a big deal, but
The only thing about that is the right of way extends beyond paved surfaces and people don't know, and the borough doesn't always know what the right of way is. That varies depending on the alley, the road, the highway, and it's not easily definable.
So, Ms. Camp,
Okay.
are we at substantive changes at this point?
Some of these,
I
yes.
think we ought to, I appreciate you being here, but I think we just need to take this back to committee to look at it and rewrite it. I mean, wordsmithing it here live doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, we've been doing this for 8 months. So I think we ought to take this back to
Wait.
committee.
I will be happy, or Sean has a copy of this that they can send to you for your consideration. And I'm sorry that it occurred at this point in time. If I had seen a final draft earlier, or not a final draft, but I'm sorry.
Drafts have been out for,
Yes, and I apologize. I have had personal things that precluded that going on. But this was my opportunity to make sure that hopefully you get it right on one go.
We want to get it right. That's why we spent so much time on it. So we'll gladly take your copy. I think some of the suggestions you made make
And
sense.
I would be very much available by phone or by email if you have any questions about any comment that I've made.
Yeah, thank you.
It is with an eye toward ordinances and and that other thing that you addressed, the 3-yard versus, I mean, that is, when you put it in there, then they have to have 3-yard if they're public collection beyond. So thank you very much.
thank you.
So do you want to continue the hearing or do you want to just have it go back to committee and re-advertise when you're ready?
Well, if there can be substantial change, we have to.
That's true.
re-advertise
You're right.
anyway.
That's
So
right.
I think we'll
So
take it back to committee.
we'll make sure that you have the email and committee can go through and then direct me which ones you want and don't want, or I'll work through Dawn. Thank you. Thank you, Ann.
Are there any other comments since we're still on the topic? Okay. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, we don't need to take a motion to put that back to committee, correct? Okay. So public hearing number 2, chapter 66, amending the code of the Borough of Westchester, chapter 66, titled Housing and Property Maintenance, to amend section 66-2, titled Amendments, Additions, and Deletions, by amending section 202, titled Definitions, to amend the definition of rents, leases, or lets, and amending chapter 10, section 1000.2, titled Definitions, to amend the definitions of occupant, rental agreement or lease, rents, leases, or lets, and residential rental dwelling unit.
Okay, so this is also an amendment to chapter 66, which is your property maintenance code. We did advertise tonight's hearing in the Daily Local News on March 11th. And I also sent a copy of the ordinance for public inspection to the Daily Local and Chester County Law Library. The scope of this ordinance amendment was to fix an ambiguity, I would say. Right now, so in your property maintenance code, council has adopted a chapter 10, which has an obligation for people that rent their properties to obtain rental permits. And as part of that, the issue was if somebody, so the scenario is I buy a house in the borough and I want my 26 and my 23-year-old daughters to live there. I don't enter a lease with them. Am I required to get a rental permit? And how that has been interpreted and enforced over the years has not been consistent. So Ramsey coming in asked and council agreed, and I think Sean weighed in on this as well. Let's just, rather than sit here and go back and forth on whether it should or shouldn't, let's have council talk about and decide in that scenario where somebody owns the property but is not occupying the property as their residence, is that a rental that you want them to be subject to the provisions of Article 10 or Article 10 and get a rental permit? That was the intention of these changes. The language, the way those definitions are worded now, implied that you needed to have some consideration provided. So in the scenario of my daughters living there, it's somewhat ambiguous as, is there consideration, right? Are they doing the chores? Are they then give me something else? So again, just trying to avoid any ambiguities and making it very clear and black and white. If you are not on the deed and somebody else is residing at the property, that will be considered a rental, that a rental permit is needed. That was the intention of these changes.
And I think that the whole purpose of that is so that it gets inspected for life, safety, et cetera.
It's also, there's a lot of enforcement issues that the code department doesn't know who's in those properties, because the only way that we have the landlord tenant forms that identify who's in those is if there is a rental permit. So it is safety driven, I think, in a lot of ways, to have knowledge of who is occupying and who can be accountable for code violations at that particular property.
Comments? Any public comments, questions?
Ann Carroll, 506 South Franklin Street, and also representing the comments that we've had from Case in the fall when this was first being discussed. The rooming unit that is part of occupant, and this is just a comment, rooming unit applies, maybe it's a question, only to rooming houses. That's what I think. So I want to make, when we're all reading that, we need to understand that that's rooming houses. So I'm not sure. I understand the intent, but I'm not sure how an oral permission should apply for rooming units. So I need clarification on this. And I need clarification as to whether there is going to be a written document, not only to the occupant, but a written document to the borough. From what I just understood, oh, I'm seeing a no, there's not.
The borough doesn't require that you provide us with a copy of your lease, but what Chapter 66 does require is that the leases for rental units have an addendum attached that identifies some of the rules in Article 10 of Chapter 66. And that is an owner and landlord's obligation to make sure that those leases have that addendum. What this is trying to address is, again, let's go back to the scenario of me letting my children live there. I still have to have that, if it's an oral permission, I have to give a written document to my children that identifies what their obligations are as occupants, because Chapter 66 has owner's obligations and occupants' obligations. So whether or not I'm leasing it through a written lease, those occupants still have those legal obligations that section, I think it's 1003 point something. So again, under Chapter 66, Article 10, there are two sections, occupant duties and landlord duties. So
Okay, so in your introduction, you said that this would be a way for the borough to know how a house was being used. If they're not filing a document with the borough,
they need to get a rental permit. Right now, they're not
Okay.
getting a rental permit.
that was my
They'll have the
question.
rental permit and they'll have the tenant information.
That is the clarification that I needed. Thank you. If it's an oral, oh, never mind. It says in the rents, leases, and lets, the non-owner person may be an individual. Does that mean must?
No, it just means that, so again, there was a lot of confusion that if the owner's relatives are the occupants, does that obviate the need to get a rental permit? And that sentence was just to be clear that it doesn't matter if you are a relative of the owner, you're still considered, you can still be renting, leasing, or letting. That was the intention of that last sentence. You don't have to be. And in most situations, it's not going to be somebody that's related to the owner.
Okay, so now how do we limit the number of people who are going to be given oral permissions and the rental permit specifying such a thing.
We have no control over that. We have no control over how owners choose to enter contracts for non-owners to reside at their property. We can't
Okay,
control that.
so now we are back to a very specific Southeast problem. If this can occur, and all I have to do is have a rental permit for you for a single-family home, and then they have their 2 sons for whom they originally bought the home, and 2 or 6 of his closest friends.
No, you're mixing the concepts of zoning,
Mhm.
which has limitations, and the concept of the rental permit. So the zoning regulations are not being touched. There are still maximum number of not unrelated people that can reside in a property. And specific, yes, in 4, and
So-
especially student homes, it's 4. So that has nothing to do with, this is just the permit that's needed for non-owners to be in your property.
But to be a student home, you have to have a special permit in our zoning code.
In zoning, correct. You need to
So-
be a lawful non-conforming student home, correct?
Right. So is it going to be up to the neighbors to make sure that the children of the owners do not invite 2 of their closest friends or 6 of their closest friends?
Well,
and
I'm not
become a
still not
student.
Understanding with, so if, do you want to go back to the scenario of my daughters? Does that help? So I own the property. I let my 26 and my 23-year-old daughters live there, and they want 2 of their friends to live there. They may or may not be students. That's still, well, if they're students, my 2 kids are not students. They're allowed to have 1 other person that's a student and 1 other person who's not. That's under zoning. We're not touching that.
I understand that, but my point is, does it still rely upon us, primarily in the Southeast, to police this effort? In other words, scenario, I bought a house for my niece and nephew who are going to the closest university, Immaculata. And they decide to have 2 more students from a close university, Westchester, join them. That's a student home by our definition. But they've signed up through their parents with an oral permission with a lease rental permit through the borough for their 2 kids. So it isn't, and now it may or may not be known to the parents that this is happening, and they may or may not be collecting rent. How do we know?
So that would be in violation. So what this is saying is because these units now, these homes with the child that may or may not be paying rent, they have to go through the process of getting a permit. They have to say, these are the people that are living in my home. And they have to be inspected and they have to go through all those processes. So if there is now actually more controls put into place to see who's living there. Now, people lie and they bring in other people and they do all the things that could be done. Yeah, you're right. The neighbors might have to be on the lookout and have to report it if they see something. But what this actually does, though, is put in a couple more controls and then we can go back and say, hey, you just said this is the only person living there, but look at, you've got like 4 other people living there. That's a problem. And that can actually then be enforced.
And
So it
I
gives a
think,
little
Ann,
bit
one of the things that's happening a lot is people are actually doing the right thing and calling the borough and finding out what the rules are. And before, there wasn't clarity as to the scenario that I gave you of, well, do I need a rental permit if people that I'm related to are living there? So
On
this
our-
is intended to help now those people that are doing the right thing and inquiring about the rules in advance to now know they have to have a rental permit, which then gives a chance to have a dialogue with them about not only the rental permit rules, but the zoning rules.
Does the rental permit have a requirement to tell how many people they are
Yes.
renting
It has
to?
the landlord tenant form that says you identify every tenant, yes.
Okay. That clarification was what I needed, and I can take back to Civic Action Southeast. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments? Okay. Somebody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the Chapter 66 amendments.
Second.
Mr. Metrick, please call the question.
Ms. Dorsey,
Yes.
Mr. Flynn.
Yes.
Ms. Vaccaro,
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis.
Yes.
Mr. Travis,
Yes.
Ms. Shimoni,
Yes.
and Mr. McCoy.
Yes. Okay, that concludes our public hearings, and we will now call to order the Borough Council meeting. Starting with the Pledge of Allegiance, we'll have that led by Ms. Vaccaro. Okay, we're moving on to announcements. Going to announce the vacancies for the borough boards and commissions and committees. Number one, the Civil Service Commission, an alternate position that does have a borough residency requirement. Human Relations Commission also has a borough residency requirement, and you shall not hold any office in any political party. Number three, the Planning Commission, also with a borough residency requirement. The Public Arts Commission, the Tree Commission. We will be moving holding the Borough Council meetings on May 21 and May 22, 2025. And we held a executive session earlier this evening to discuss legal matters.
Mr. President, can we move under B, 1 and 2 to discussion under A and old business, please? Need a second.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
One person.
Okay, so moved.
So clarity on the consent agenda, items number 1 and number 2 are being moved to discussion.
Correct.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any others?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move item number 16 on consent, letter C, to get more clarity on, under certificate of appropriateness, the North Church Street new dining platform.
Okay,
To discussion, please.
thank you. Next, we'll have comments, suggestions, petitions by residents in attendance regarding items not on the agenda. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to comments by Borough Council and Mayor, starting with Mrs. Carroll.
I just want to say thank you to everyone working for the borough, specifically building and housing. You're doing an amazing job in making some really impressive moves, and enjoy the nice weather. It's warming up, and let's stay outside. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGinnis.
Yeah, we had the pleasure, I believe, last Friday or the Friday before, myself, the mayor, and Senator Committa in the 3rd Ward, a new hot chicken shop opened up, Nanu's Hot Chicken. So I encourage you all to go there and check it out.
Thank you, Mr. Travis.
Yeah, similar. The Mino Sushi and Ramen place opened up where the old Starbucks was, and it looks fantastic. My daughter's actually there with a friend tonight. She's probably there right now. I'm going to get the full report when I get back, and looking forward to going myself.
Thank you. Ms. Dorsey.
Mr. McCoy. We are very close to springing, as Ms. Vaccaro said. Also wanted to make a call out for some of the new businesses that are coming to the borough. One, Ula Acai Restaurant, the opening in the spring. We've got Station 142, which is in the old Serum restaurant space on Market Street, is going to be a concert venue, so looking forward to that opening. And the Chester County Visitor Center is moving to Westchester, to downtown Westchester in the old courthouse. And April 5th, Easter egg hunt from 7 to 5. So you want to hunt some Easter egg prizes in local businesses for discounts and coupons. I encourage you to do that. Thank you.
Greetings from the sweetest ward in the borough, the 6th Ward. everybody here is talking about the Sixth Ward. Isn't that wonderful? Everything begins and ends in the Sixth Ward of Westchester Borough. To Miss Dorsey's point, it's an adult Easter egg hunt. It's going to be really exciting. We had it last year. It runs from 5 to 7 p.m. All the different eggs are stored in different stores and behind things, on top of things. Libations are around the area, so makes it a little bit more fun. But come enjoy the Sixth Ward.
Thank you. Ms. Simone.
That's right.
Greetings from the Fourth Ward, where I wanted to talk about cleaning up some trash. No, seriously, I'm going to talk some more trash. No, yeah, on March 29th, CRC cleanup. I know we've mentioned it before, but I'm excited about it. I did it last year, and just cleaning up the streams going through Westchester. I think it's 9 to 11:30. If you haven't signed up, it's a fun day. It's nice being outside. It's a little dirty of a day, but you feel like really satisfied that you've done something for our environment and our community when you're done. So highly recommend signing up and helping out the community and having a good day.
Thank you. Mayor DeBaptiste.
So I'm a good trash talker too, Nicole. So in the end of April, the mayor's department, the police department, Chief Josh Lee, along with the Community Campus Committee, which is a collaboration between the Westchester University and the residents of Westchester. Together, we are going to have a community cleanup, which will meet here at 12 noon. I believe what's that Sunday's date? I think it's the 29th of April. So we'll be cleaning up. And I can also say, welcome to all the new businesses. And I have eaten at both Mino's and Nanu's, and the food is good in both places. So welcome to all the Westchester businesses.
Thank you. Well, you all took all the stuff I was going to say, so happy spring. It's a day away. And with that, we will move on to reports and presentations. Borough Manager's report.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Sean Metrick, and I'm going to be a little brief tonight because we've had a couple of long hearings. But I want to update council on some of the progress that the staff has been making. But before I get into that, I just want to thank the staff for holding down the fort during my absence on Thursday, Friday, and Monday. Thank you all very much for making sure the borough kept running while I was down in some warm weather, getting to watch a little college spring training baseball. So thank you very much. Last time I gave my borough manager's report, I talked about my organizational development plan for this year, and then I had my performance review with leadership on council, and I was really pleased how my view of what we needed to work on and your view of what I needed to work on were aligned. So I wanted to just comment a little bit on the 3 subject areas that were in that discussion that we've made some progress on since January started, and to set some expectations for everybody. Around communication and engagement, we have a team organized around that in the staff, and we've completed the inventory of all the platforms we currently have, and we're developing standards for quality, frequency, and processes that we're going to push out communication to be proactive about administrative changes and promote the good work that we do, and get some more proactive communication getting pushed out from the organization. The police department and the parks department are already doing a great job of this, and I want to level up the administrative team to complement what those 2 pieces of the organization are already doing. So I did assign in part of my performance management, which I'll comment on later, I did assign communication deliverables to all of the management team over the next 90 days. So you should start to see things get pushed out April and May and into June. You'll see it. Hopefully you'll notice a change on Facebook and the website and so forth. Commenting on the website, we are focusing on the building and housing web pages. And Mr. Travis, you're absolutely right. We decided the best thing to do was just to blow it up And what we're going to do is build about, we're going to build about 7 or 8 pages and work on them and iterate through them. And then we're going to flip the switch probably sometime in late April to take down the old pages and put up the new ones. There's going to be much easier to find. We're going much leaner with the organization of that information around our 4 functional areas: planning and zoning, codes enforcement, building permits, and rental licenses. And that'll be the 4 functional areas that we focus on. And that's how we're going to continue to talk about building and housing in those 4 areas. Right now, our expert webpage builder is enjoying a cruise in the, do you say Caribbean or Caribbean? Can you settle an argument I have with my wife? What?
It's supposed to be Caribbean from folks I know that are actually from the Caribbean.
There you go. Well, now I have it on recording now, so thank you. I'll play that for Susie later. The second thing I want to focus on is the building and housing department. And like I said, we've broken it down into those 4 areas I just mentioned, and I just want to comment on the goals that I've set in those 4 areas for now. For planning and zoning, we want to provide accurate, timely information about all active and recently approved applications for subdivision land development on the web pages, so that you all and everybody in the room doesn't have to wonder what's going on with Rubenstein's or 330 West Market. And the truth is, with a lot of these big projects, they do sit still for a while, but at least we can go to the web page and find the most current information there on where things stand. With codes enforcement, we have 2 full-time codes enforcement officers now, and we have been working on, under Ramsey's leadership, assigning publicly driven responses as well as proactive enforcement routines. So we want to see all submitted case requests addressed within 2 business days, and we want to conduct at least 10 hours total of proactive codes enforcement. That's codes enforcement that goes beyond just what we've been notified through the case requests per week. With rental licensing, those same 2 full-time officers are devoting about a third of their hours per week to doing rental inspections and documenting rental inspections. We also have our third party engaged to take care of our larger rental properties. If you take just our 22 largest rental properties, that accounts for about a quarter of all of our rental units. And I think Ramsey and I have been talking, we're going to keep our third party engaged on those big properties. So when we need to go out and inspect 300 East Marshall Street, the Metropolitan, that would be something our third party can handle for us. We think that's a good fit for now. So we are performing a minimum of 45 hours per week of in-the-field rental inspections. And our goal in the short term is to bring all of our rental properties current to a 24-month rental last inspection. When we get to that point, we're going to convert to a monthly routine where we're going to try and knock that 24-month interval down as low as we can get it, perhaps to 18, perhaps to 12. But our first target is 24 months. We also are in the process of contacting all the delinquent license owners. Those are people who haven't paid or submitted the tenant landlord form. We actually have a list of a little over 100 that are going to get, we already got nasty letters from us. They're going to get very nasty letters from us, which are going to be essentially proceedings to suspend their licenses because they don't technically have valid licenses. So that's quite a bit of work that's going to be pushed out from the department. It's only possible with the added personnel that council put in the budget and that we were able to bring on and train on. And our newest assistant, Keisha McKenzie's working out great. I hope you come over and say hi at some point during the day when she's here between 8 and 4. And lastly, building permits, sort of normal standards there. We're going to make sure we stay within UCC guidelines and make sure all of our residential permits get addressed within 15 business days, 30 business days for commercial. And we want to do the completeness review for applications within 2 business days. And provide great customer service for people who might be struggling with our online submittal process. And lastly, with performance management, I've met with all of our management team. We've set 90-day performance goals, And we're going to be reconvening next week to look at our first progress steps, our first 30-day progress steps on all those goals. Those are all aligned with my organizational development plan. So everybody on the team is doing something with communication or customer service or standard operating procedures, documenting how we do things, getting things down in writing. And for those employees that report to me who also have people to report to them, eventually when we get through this first 90-day cycle, they're going to do this goal setting practice with their direct reports as well. So that's how things are going so far this year. It's been good so far. I just want to thank everybody for supporting me. Dana, you did a great job today with the meeting that you ran. So thanks. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Appreciate the proactive work. It's getting done. And I'll give a call out to Ramsey and thank you for your interim leadership. Much appreciated. Any comments or questions from council? Public comments? Okay. We will move on to old business. I'm going to move the lease for the SEPTA in Westchester Borough and the Westchester Borough and Railroad up to item 1 because I know that Mr. Pielli here is, I'm sure your time crunch, so we'll get you up. So it's up for discussion. So the first one, the motion to approve the lease between SEPTA and Westchester Borough. I'm not sure that there's any discussion specifically about that item. I have none in particular. Mine is more towards number 2 between the borough and the railroad.
I just have a question on that one. And again, I apologize. I was not here last week when this was discussed in ACT, and I did not have a chance to review this as in depth as I wanted to, but I would like to just kind of review the lease terms and potentially take this one back to committee and spend a little bit more time with it. I'm not sure how we came up with a 15-year lease. If that's just a number that was thrown out there and we went with it, fine. But
One other thing to point out is that I don't think the actual lease, the written lease, is in the attachment. So we need something to.
You mean the sublease?
The sublease, I'm sorry, yeah. So we have the old one, we have the 08 to 11, the 11 to 23, but we don't have the 23. I know we had a year-to-year, 5-year option, but the new lease as proposed is not, we don't have a copy of that.
There's two, so Mr. President, sorry, excuse me. There's 2 documents. There's 2 things we're approving. One is the long-term SEPTA lease to the borough.
Correct.
And the other would be our resolution or sublease, which is the next item, I think.
Correct.
So the first item, though, I think we would still like to take it back to committee and discuss the terms, if people agree to that.
I'm fine with that.
I just have, what are we questioning? The term? We
Yeah.
want a shorter or a longer lease with SEPTA?
How did we pick 15 years? Did SEPTA give that number to us?
That's what it's been, the original one,
Okay.
the original one and the.
So if I'm the only one coming in cold here on this one. So is everybody else comfortable?
No, I think, if we're going to look at item 1 and item 2, let's take back 1 to committee and wash that out to make sure it is 15 years that SEPTA is actually willing to give us, okay? And then that's one item that we can sign off on. Once we all agree that looks good. And of course, then the sublease is the major concern.
Well,
But I think if you're trying to add something to the sublease, SEPTA needs to approve that. SEPTA has already approved both the lease and the sublease. And we don't have a ton of wiggle room. A lot of it's dictated by SEPTA. So, but I don't know what change you're trying to make. So I would say that you take them both back if there's a change that you're trying to make. But the 15 years, you're right, was what historically had been when it was initially leased, I believe.
I don't know if there's anyone from Westchester Railroad here tonight in the room, but you can correct me if I say this wrong. I do think that the 15-year term of the proposed new lease was something that Westchester Railroad was advocating for, to have a longer time frame to plan and enact and raise funds and make capital improvements to the infrastructure. They wanted that longer time frame for more assurance that if they're going to fundraise for something that's going to be a six-figure expenditure, that they know they can do it, operate for a longer amount of time, if I'm phrasing that correctly. So there
McCoy,
was.
That's absolutely correct. For the past, that we were giving them one-year leases, and every year it's the same request. They wanted a 15 years so that they could do everything you mentioned that they wanted to do, but they've been doing very well with the 1 and 5 year leases that have been operating. The problem is on the sublease and on the other leases. Last night I asked the question, how long is the lease? And you assumed that I asked about SEPTA, which I did, and you said 15 years. And then Mr. Travis said, well, what about the sublease? And you said 15 years. Well, I'm not feeling very comfortable with 15-year lease with a property that's subleasing from us at this particular time. And I asked a couple of people on council whether I could move it from consent to discussion. And Mr. McGinnis jumped on it and got it, because I want to actually table it so it go back to committee and rework it, because 15-year lease just doesn't work.
So can I ask that we take each one individually? There are individual items on the agenda, right? There's item number 1, which is the SEPTA lease, and there's item number 2, which is the sublease. The SEPTA lease, I don't think is anything new, right? That the 15-year term that we have had with them is standard operating procedure. Are we questioning the SEPTA lease?
Yeah, because what I heard was it was being dictated by 4 states. That's who came up with the 15 years.
That was not.
The lease is,
So there's confusion, and that's why I wanted to have some discussion.
Well, was
think we
that
can-
not recommended by the committee to?
It was
2-0
recommended by the committee 2-0.
For the SEPTA lease I'm talking about.
Yes.
Because that, basically, that doesn't change from, that doesn't change with SEPTA. So that's between SEPTA and Westchester, not SEPTA and core states,
So
nor is it between core states and Westchester. The lease with SEPTA is between. Hmm?
lease is between SEPTA and the borough.
Exactly.
And the borough turns into subleases into 4 states. And basically, any obligations of the borough get carried over in the sublease to 4 states.
Okay, so let's just either approve the lease with SEPTA or not. I think those on the committee read it, or is that an incorrect statement?
I was in attendance, although I'm not part of the committee, and it was on the agenda last night as 2-0 recommended. Both of them actually were recommended 2-0. So I'm confused as to why Mr. McGinnis, who voted 2-0, is asking for it now to be reconsidered.
That's because there were questions that were raised about the lease itself.
So it sounds like more so the questions are with the sublease than the overriding SEPTA lease. So we might be okay with the overriding SEPTA lease tonight, and to get that, because that's been delayed and stuff, and SEPTA's, that's a bigger conversation with SEPTA. So if they're okay with it and it's a repeat of what we've been doing, maybe we are okay with going forth with the SEPTA one tonight and then taking the 4 states back to.
I mean, that would be fine with me. I read the SEPTA lease, and I read the 2008 and the 2011 amendment to the 4 states. It's hard to not talk about these things together, because right now the
You
only
go
use
around-
we have for the railroad is for the Westchester.
And you don't really act as a tenant. All of your obligations are transferred directly. They've always been done hand in hand.
Right.
So I think that you should feel comfortable with both of them.
They always have until, something changes.
And,
I-
and clearly something's changed, so why don't we talk about what's changed?
Mr. McCoy?
That's why you're here. I would
Well,
assume
I mean, we'll have
Representative.
the council give their comments and then we'll open it up to the public, including Mr. Piella. Additional comments by council.
So why don't we start with Brian since he's changed his opinion?
Brian, who? Right, right. So,
And voted.
so the issue here is that regarding the 15-year time frame, in which case there was confusion last night, and I don't think there was anything that was out there for the sublease. Was there an attachment for the sublease that stated 15 years? Right. So that is where, and it was my fault because I had thought that that was part of the SEPTA lease. And therefore, when it came about the 15-year lease, that's when the questions did arrive after I reread the SEPTA lease and confusing the two.
Mr. McCoy, what jumped out at me, Jeff, can you move it up just a little bit? From the back, when you started background, stop. All I see is years ago, when I had brown hair and much younger, I don't see anything on there that says 2025, other said it expires in 2025. Everything else is whereas, the second lease, June 18, 2008, then 2008. I don't think this agreement right here is clean enough to make any sense. And I think the numbers need the dates need to reflect. So that's why I mentioned that that's why I couldn't figure out where the 15 years comes in. Because I couldn't find the number 15 anywhere. Plus, all I see is the old dates. And I think we should have a fresh, clean contract up there for council to review.
That whereas clause is just explaining what prior contracts you've entered. Right now, you are in year 2 of 5 one-year renewals. So believe it or not, it's not that easy to spell out what you're saying because
Yeah,
there were leases, there were amendments to leases, it wasn't a clear linear path,
Solicitor,
But-
if you can't read it.
but we can read it.
Now,
That's
but
really
you
just saying the
can- You
history.
can read it because you have a law degree. The 7 of us up here are looking and all we see is what we see.
But that whereas clause is just telling you historically there were leases that were entered and this is a starting fresh as of the effective date of this lease. This is going forward. So we could get rid of all of those whereas clauses because it's really a
It's
brand new
not
lease.
clean. The
Okay.
document is not clean.
Can I
That's
just
why I
make a
mentioned
point?
it.
There's
Back.
new information that has come up since we agreed on pushing this through, and we needed to take this back to committee. End of discussion. I don't think we need to talk about this anymore.
But since we're here and you're here, Mr. Piella, please.
Thank you, council. I appreciate you letting me speak on this issue. There is new information. It's kind of old information too. So as you all know, we haven't had rail service here since 1986. And since that time, our population in this district has grown over 80%. Our business has grown, business base also over 80%. We have a premier hospital. We have a state-of-the-art, I call it the crown jewel of the FIA system for the university. We have more businesses now than we've ever had before, and our needs are not being met by SEPTA. I don't think anybody can argue that, including SEPTA themselves. They'll admit it. Now, what you're hearing from SEPTA, and I'd love to discuss this with you and what I'm hearing for SEPTA are two different things. Because SEPTA supposedly has been saying that we're willing to look into gifting the line. We're willing to look into maybe a 99-year lease because there's a realization that they cannot meet the needs of our constituents, of our residents here, public transportation. So let me give you a little idea of what's going on where my perspective is representing all of you and the entire district. Since that time, since that tremendous growth that we've had, SEPTA gets funded by, yes, a yearly allocation from the state. They always hear about that. There's always arguments about that, whether to get enough or not. But most of their funding comes sales and use tax. And since the time of 1986 to now, Chester County, for example, 1/3 the population of Philadelphia, yet we contribute nearly 60% of sales tax revenue that Philadelphia does. When you look at what we're getting in return for our tax dollars over the years, we're getting less and less. This bus revolution is a bus reduction. I'm hearing from our business owners continually that they can't get employees to work here. People can't afford to live here anymore. Now they can't afford to come here anymore by public transportation. The Chester County Business and Industry, the Chamber, therefore exploring opening up the rail line. So is the university, so is the hospital, so is Cheney University. Cheney, for example, I know I've talked to all of you about this ad nauseum, but most of the folks don't know. When they shut that rail line, they lost 31% of their student enrollment. Most of their students don't own cars. Now there's a bus reduction. They're struggling. It's not sustainable. I've been working very hard to get funding for a possible future rail to come back into Westchester. I've been told today by appropriations, no lease, no money. So if you give a 15-year lease to this nonprofit, I can assure you that's 15 years. There's not going to be any possibility of a rail coming here. Now, some of you may be okay with that for different various reasons, but you'll be on the record for that. And when the businesses ask you, when the people ask you, it's something you got to think about. We have to think of a vision. We have to think of the future. And the future, our needs are not being met by SEPTA, and they won't be for the foreseeable future. If they felt that they could, they wouldn't be entering into 15-year leases with you folks. That's for sure. So I urge you, whatever you do with the leases, take a step back, think about this. I've been working really hard to get funding. There's no funding going to come here. So it's, and by the way, every plan that we've talked about, every consideration has been to keep the Westchester Historic Railroad going. This thing was going to be a Monday through Friday operation, and it still intends to be. It's going to be a project that's going to take time. But whatever lease you enter into, please consider some type of provision, at the very least, that would allow funding for the rail restoration project. This can be an and also. It doesn't have to be an either or. And for the sake of our future businesses, our residents, our workers trying to come here, I would ask you please to consider that. Take a little time out before you jump into this. And if that can't happen, if you could please consider not such a long lease, maybe a year lease, a year-to-year lease, something, if time is of the essence. But I don't know why we feel like we should have a gun to our head because of SEPTA. And that's what's been going on. So I made the joke before many times, because of the taxes that we contribute and we're getting less and less, that what we're talking about basically is taxation without transportation. And when you're an elected official and people start asking you about this, why are you voting to fund SEPTA when we're getting less and less? They could be asking you the same thing too. So please consider that. I thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, any need for more information, I'm here for you. Thank you.
I have a question for you, Representative Paley. You seem to have a lot of statistics around SEPTA. Do you have any statistics around the ridership and how it's grown or decreased recently, as well as the funding for SEPTA?
So SEPTA is not considering any funding for this line whatsoever. SEPTA will not consider any funding for this line. I want to say that loud and clear. The studies are old. The last I saw was over 10 years old.
I'm referencing the solvency of SEPTA, not the funding of the railroad from here to Media, but their financial picture.
Their whole financial picture?
Yes.
Oh, overall, it's bad. They are in what they described as a possible death spiral. there's a very good possibility. I'm not predicting. I'm just saying there's a possibility that if we can't get substantial money to SEPTA, that might come true. We might not have a SEPTA. But the plan is to maintain their footprint as best they can with some cuts, including here in Chester County. There's going to be more budget cuts. If they don't get the funding that they need, the cuts are going to be extremely drastic. They just do not have the bandwidth to be able to expand at this time or for the foreseeable future. That's the reality. So my issue with them was if you can't do it, if you're telling me 10, 20 years and already we have an 80% population growth since you shut the rail down, then why not give it to us? You could maintain ownership over it with a lease or whatever, but give it to us. I can't get funding from appropriations without a lease. I was told that clearly today. So that's all the more reason why I'd ask you to take a deep, hard look at this.
You and your fellow representatives in Harrisburg had any conversations around a shuttle from here to Exton where we can get to Philadelphia much quicker than we can get to Philadelphia from going to Elwyn to Media and then taking the train to Philly?
Yeah, SEPTA's been talking about shuttles, smaller buses, things like that, but they're not doing it. They're incapable of doing. What we're talking about again is more and more reduction. So
I do think the university has a bus that goes from Church Street to Exton that they shuttle the students for free on. So that's helpful.
For the
university has, they're trying their best, but of course they're in this day and age, they're facing funding cuts too, which is a whole other conversation. So they've been pushing on this a lot. I mean, some of the stories I know I've shared with you with your local businesses, we've had, we have many nursing homes and older residents, and they're dying for people to come and work. There's a shortage of workers. And so they're trying to expand and recruit from like Upper Darby or the Philadelphia area. And one of the stories I love to repeat, and I know I've said it to you guys a couple of times, is the one at the Hickman, where two people came in for an interview and sat down and they were starting and they said, don't even start. We can't take this job if you offer it to us. It took us nearly 2 hours to get here. I've got kids. I got to get home. I can't take this job. So the opportunities for us to employ and to fill some of these many jobs that we need, that are crucial jobs, are being hurt. It's a disservice.
A question. You mentioned that in your conversation with the appropriation, they said without a lease,
Mhm.
you won't be able to get funding. A lease with whom?
So the Westchester Rail Restoration folks have recently organized and formed two nonprofit entities. One is for management of a rail line eventually, and the other one is for funding streams. And because they have that was a big step. That's when I started pushing with appropriations, and appropriations said, hey, something we could talk about. This is the discussion. Obviously, it makes sense because, the reality is in Harrisburg, there's only a 1-seat majority. Usually that majority, the Democratic majority, is voting for public transportation. But for the first time, they're starting to hear from me and some of my other colleagues that, wait a minute, we have to think a little bit more about our districts and our needs. So they were willing to talk and say, okay, let's see what we can do. And I came to them with this idea that thankfully you guys, gave the okay for this rail restoration committee and some of the plans that they had. So they discussed with leadership, and I was told today, okay, you got everything in place to start the process, but you don't have a lease, do you? I was like, no, we don't have a lease. And it was just today that I found out that this lease was coming up. And so that's why I'm here today. I came from Harrisburg.
So again, just for clarity, so the lease that they're looking for is a lease between one of these not-for-profits and the borough, or a sublease?
Yes. There's either two ways to go. There was either a transportation authority, small or local, which would not be associated with the borough. Similar to what we have in West Goshen, the Sewer Authority, for example, where they could raise money through fees of whatever. But there's also the nonprofit way. I think it's a 501c3, and they went the nonprofit way. They're both set up. And I don't believe it has to be an exclusive lease. If you were to sublease to the Westchester Historical Railroad, which I would encourage, because it's an asset. It's a nice thing to have. People like it, and it is something that we should seek to, promote and protect. But you could also have a lease in addition to this entity to have that ability to be able to do that. If you don't do that, and if you just enter into the lease with the nonprofit, the historic railroad, I doubt very much that they're going to be willing to work and push aside, especially if you do it for 15 years. Then what we're doing is abdicating a responsibility for our constituents and their needs. And that's something that I feel strongly about. We have to try to take some type of action. And when we have the continual cycle with SEPTA just surviving, we have to look to new ideas. We have to look to new methods. It starts somewhere.
Can I ask you, so is the idea for if SEPTA goes under that Westchester would support a train that because I think right now it's like a trolley or something that just gets you to Wawa. So like, are you saying that, oh my gosh, SEPTA could go under? And if SEPTA goes under, that means the SEPTA train from Wawa to Philly goes under. So then are you saying Westchester wants to be a train?
No,
Like this organization, this nonprofit's going to want to run a train from Westchester to Philadelphia? Like if SEPTA you think is going to go under and we need this shuttle to be set up in order to be able to mitigate the fact that SEPTA goes under, I think we got bigger problems, right? Like, because nobody's going anywhere because that Wawa to Philly's not happening, right? So.
I didn't say that they were going to. I say there's a possibility that they could. And, the way things are going now, I can't give you a good prediction. I know our caucus will try its best to fund as best as we can SEPTA. But if you're going to ask me to guarantee that SEPTA is going to get the funding that they need, according to them in the last meeting that I had, they don't get a certain amount of money. They feel like they're going to have to start these massive reductions, at least 20% reductions, even out here in our 104 line and others, which is already, it's just not working for us. So it's going to be bad. And I would never suggest that the borough itself take on the responsibility of the public transportation. That's why we have transportation authorities separate and apart from the government. That's why we have sewer authorities where they set the fees, they run the show, they're able to raise the money. You could do that through an authority or you could do that through a nonprofit. So they wouldn't have any liability or any responsibility financially to the borough.
This has created more confusion for me. Like, if there are issues with SEPTA's existence in the future, I don't know why we wouldn't sign both leases, quite frankly, right? Because one of those generates revenue for people coming here as a destination site to go to the historic railroad, right? So people are coming here, they're shopping, they're going to dinner, they're spending money here. Why wouldn't we invest in that? And SEPTA, is also having problems getting workers as well. They are down 20 or 30% in bus drivers. They are down 20 or 30% in train operators. This does not set well with me. So is it a coincidence? Maybe, maybe not. That this is all, the timing of this is happening right now.
I think also I just want to note part of the reason you bring up a good point about their own employees, but in fairness to them too. So, fairness, knock them, but safety was a really big issue. Safety was a very big issue for their employees in the city. They suffered a fatality of one of their own workers, the bus drivers, and they're trying to address that as best as they can now. I'm not here saying that I know SEPTA is going to go down under. I'm just telling you that it's a possibility if we don't get that funding. I'm a supporter of public transportation overall. I'm a supporter. I'd like to see more public transportation. I give SEPTA a pass to an extent because when you compare SEPTA and its funding in Pennsylvania compared to other states, it's deplorable. It's deplorable how they, for decades, were underfunded. So I give them a pass to an extent, but I also see that they're making some mistakes as far as how they can react. And one of them is, why would you want to hold on to something if you could lease it and make it better somewhere else? So that's something that I've been struggling with them, and it's difficult to get clear messaging because I listening to you guys today, and then what I've been dealing with, I'm getting like two different messages,
So
and I don't know if that's dysfunction or if that's design. I don't know.
I have just a couple of questions. So I think I understand a little better. So you want this lease to be reviewed, which is, I guess, all the flurry of change here, so that we can consider looking at a lease with the Westchester Railroad, which is not the historic railroad. However, I guess my question is threefold. One, then will, as long as the Westchester Historic Railroad is not put out of business, because how many years away are are they talking about funding it this year? Are they talking about funding it next year? When are they talking about giving you these funds or giving the railroad these funds to do what? It's clearly not to have a train, but to do what? What, they say they won't release funds without a lease that says what? Because clearly, is this that wasn't me, by the way. Is this a nonprofit organization or a not-for-profit organization? I mean, and if we're giving them a lease, because one of the concerns that happened before was they were trying to put aside the historic railroad that's been in there doing a lot of work, and all the people there are volunteers. And so, that is an entity that is an attraction in Westchester. Understanding the needs of rail and the needs of people and employers is important, but I just wonder where we are in the pipeline to, so that if we're looking at this, we can say, yes, a 5-year lease because you're 5 years out. What exactly are they going to do with the lease in their hand?
So what I'm asking for today is whatever leasing agreement you sign, that you have an enabling provision in there to be able to lease to the nonprofit. You don't have to come up with a lease with a nonprofit today or tomorrow, next week, but in your lease, have that flexibility that you're able to, if you are going to go through with a 15-year lease with SEPTA and then in turn going to turn around and sublease to other entities, then I ask at the very least that you have an enabling provision in there that would allow you to give that lease to that nonprofit. The Westchester Rail Restoration is a project that's going to take years. It's going to take years. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not, but we have to start. And that's what I'm trying to do. If you sign a lease with another entity, there's no guarantee they're going to say, oh yeah, sure, we'll do it. There seems to be a history for some reason that they don't think they could coexist. Everything I'm hearing from my side is that, yeah, it's going to be a Monday through Friday rail. They could do whatever they want on the weekends and the holidays. We could start that way and go forward. But if you enter into a 15-year lease to another entity and you divest your authority and give it to them to decide about the needs of our public transportation needs, it's dead for 15 years. I mean, you basically boxed yourself in and you won't have the ability. So that's why I'm asking for at least an enabling provision in your lease to enable you to lease to another subletter.
Right, and Westchester Railroad is under the purview of Westchester, which certainly cannot take the expense of a railroad. So that's why I'm asking, what are they going to then do? Divest themselves from Westchester and become a nonprofit or a not-for-profit, as it were? so that Westchester, if given an opportunity to have dual subleases, can make sure that we're not held accountable or responsible for either one of these subleases as we, you know, as Westchester Historic Railroad takes care of their own expenses. And even though these leases have been joined at the hip, certainly they don't have to be, in my eyes, they don't have to be. We can take a fresh look at this, but certainly not to the expense of the historic railroad.
Thank you very much for your time. As I said, if you have any questions, thank you.
Question for solicitor. Do we have to put a provision in the lease between SEPTA and Westchester about additional use to nonprofits?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there a way to, because right now it's very specific, but would we have to have it as specific as it is here for the tourist railroad?
I mean,
We would have to
SEPTA,
add something
under the
in
terms
there.
of your lease, SEPTA has to approve any sublease that you do. So they
Okay.
approve both the lease and the sublease. So yes, if there are changes that are proposed in the sublease, I'd want to make sure that that's reflected in the lease and that SEPTA is on board with that.
Okay. Another question. Is there a time-sensitive component to this?
Your current lease expires June 30th, 2025.
So it's somewhat time-sensitive. So,
With SEPTA?
Yeah, and your sublease, they're both on the same one.
now I have a question for Mr. Pielli. You mentioned something about gifting the line.
I'm sorry.
You mentioned something about gifting this line.
Right. So that's why I'm saying at the beginning, we're getting two different messages from SEPTA because, as I said, it could be dysfunction or it could be design. They were actually in conversations with the Westchester Rail. I even confirmed it with Marion Moskowitz that there were discussions about either gifting it or entering into like a 99-year lease. So you can imagine my surprise when I'm hearing about these leases that are going and they're entering into, and either it wouldn't be surprising to me that one hand isn't speaking to the other in the SEPTA world. I've been dealing with them for a couple of years. That would not surprise me, but yes.
And what does gifting mean? Like, if they gift it to the borough or to the who are they gifting it to?
They would gift it to whatever authority was going to be running the rail. In this case, it would be the two nonprofits. It would not be Westchester. Westchester would not have any responsibility or liability.
And what are they gifting?
I mean, not unless Westchester wanted it, which I would not suggest.
And what are they gifting? What is the expectation of the gift? Like land?
Well, there's good arguments for the gifts. One, it's a liability for them. It's on their balance books. It's been on their balance books now for 40 years.
I'm asking what? What are they going to gift?
What are they giving? What is the
They're
gift?
gifting the line,
They're gifting land.
the land, the easement, whatever, the whole thing. I don't think they're going to go the gift route. I think more so the 99-year lease type of thing. They did that recently in Chestnut Hill area where they entered into a long-term lease. I think it might have been a 99-year lease. And it's for their entire, easement and rail line and everything. And people are building like in the old stations because it's no longer operable. They're building like coffee shops, stuff like that. That's the idea, what they wanted to do. So they have done this before as far as these like long-term leases where they're handing it over to another authority.
Can I ask you another question? You're looking for money to provide support for running this train, which is or the trolley, it is. It's like a little trolley that goes back and forth to Wawa. That's very limited in scope, right? And the ability to get people. Like once that's there, it can only go so many places. Are you doing similar work for bus lines, the things that you're concerned about, like not happening? Would that money almost be more helpful with going to somebody running a bus line that gets people to the grocery store and to the hospital and to all the things that they need to get to? Because it's more flexible over time. You can adjust it. You can adjust the timetables. You can adjust a lot of different things. You can run it on the weekends when people want to go places on the weekends. Are you doing that work as well?
Yeah, we've talked about that, but that hasn't come through either. I mean, SEPTA's like a no. There's
But I mean, with the money, the appropriation money that you're
no,
talking about.
no, the appropriation money that I was seeking was for the rail line, and I think it's important. I think as the only county seat outside of Philadelphia that does not have a rail line is atrocious. We see in it, like I said, I'm a big public transportation fan. Also, it's an environmental issue. We're talking about electric battery cars. That was the first model, or even electric cars, more buses on the road. To me, is more congestion, more traffic. I hear about traffic complaints all the time. So I think it's the wave of the future to go for rail. Getting back to the disparity, we are the only county that does not have, a county seat that does not have rail service. Montgomery, Bucks, Delaware, they all have it. We see initiatives for Coatesville. We see initiatives for Phoenixville. I think they're great. That's wonderful. But you got to ask yourself, what does Phoenixville have that Westchester doesn't?
Amtrak runs right through Phoenixville and they go out to Reading. I think Amtrak's the one supporting the Phoenixville line. And again, it's not really for Phoenixville. They just happen to be in the way.
They don't have the,
They go out to Reading and like.
when you look at our hospital, when you look at our university, when you look at our business base, they don't have anything compared to us. And it's our county seat. And it's our county seat.
I mean, I'm getting into more thoughts that I have. I do question the ridership and how we get to the ridership. I do ride the train 4 days a week into Philadelphia. I take it from Exton. It's like a quick 10-minute drive. I get on there. If I want to take Amtrak, I can take Amtrak, get home faster. The cost of the train is $750 a trip. So I think the cost from Wawa is $650 a trip. So for someone who is working a hourly job, you know, it's $13 a day round trip on the SEPTA line, and then probably another $5 on, I think, what they're proposing on the trolley line. So I do question, you know, how much money you're thinking you're going to get, because also it's very expensive to ride rail, right? Like versus the buses and things like that. And so I just want to make sure that we are focusing in on the true needs of the people that need public transportation in order to be able to get them where they need to go at the cost effectiveness that they need to support the types of jobs that we think they may hold in their life. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be a great and also would love to see expanded transportation. Me personally, I would rather see more rail than buses because of the congestion, because of the traffic. You talk about time, buses are going to take a lot more time than a rail service. It's just that's the usual case. But again, SEPTA doesn't have the wherewithal for any of that, anything in the foreseeable future.
Thank you. I know we have one virtual public comment. I just want to sort of keep us on track here. What we're talking about tonight is the lease. I think we've agreed that we're going to table this, take it back to committee. But meanwhile, Mr. Schleifer, I understand you're online.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate this discussion. A few things. We have been working on this lease for over 2 years. I guess what I'm confused about, I'm a member of Westchester Railroad. I've been working very closely with Mr. Metric and Ms. Camp. We've gone back and forth about the terms of this lease, and really nothing has changed. We were in the committee meeting last week, and there were no questions about any of this. We attended the meeting last night. There were no questions about this, and I feel like now here we are to vote, and all of a sudden questions came up. A gentleman came out from Harrisburg and wants to talk about rail restoration to Westchester, and that's great. I don't understand how that affects I feel like we've gone a different direction here, and now we're not talking about our lease. We are a small business. We are a valuable part of Westchester. Westchester wants a railroad. It has a railroad. We are the railroad. SEPTA has already gone on record numerous times to say there will be no shuttle from Westchester to Wawa. It's not feasible, it's not compliant, and the ridership is not there. We've gone on record and said that we don't agree with it. SEPTA has gone on the record saying that they don't agree with it. It is already in the lease and has been in the lease for nearly 30 years that if SEPTA wants to reclaim the right-of-way, they can end our lease immediately. And that is also in the new lease that we're trying to negotiate. So I think the concern that if we lease this for 15 years, that no one else can use it, if SEPTA decides they want to give it to someone else, they can end us tomorrow. So I think I would like council to consider that and know that there are already provisions in our lease for that. And I'd be happy to discuss this more if it wants to be brought back to committee. We certainly want to discuss this and have a real discussion about it and get this to where it can be something that everyone's happy with. Year to year is not going to work. We've already gone on record and saying that. 15 years we brought to the table. We are just coming off a 15-year lease. We would like to continue a 15-year lease. We're running a railroad. Okay, we have nearly 10 miles of track to take care of. We're going for grants. We're going for money. We can't do that on a year-to-year basis. We have a plan. Okay, we just brought 20,000 riders last year to the borough. We want to keep doing that every single year. We feel like we have a good relationship with Borough. We have a good relationship with SEPTA, and we would like to continue that. But I guess we feel a little bit slighted here because, we thought this was going to be, ended tonight. And now it's all these questions were brought up at 0 hour. So we would like to discuss this and we welcome any questions, please.
Any
Thank you.
questions?
No, I don't have any questions, but I think we put a provision in for another entity in the SEPTA lease, clearly, because we don't want to close down our options.
Well, it sounds like it's there.
Well,
Seems
no,
like-
we need to add one. So that's why we needed to.
We don't know what that entity is.
We don't.
We could do that at.
That's why I was asking if we needed specifics or we could put a placeholder in.
Well,
It sounds like
all
we
the
need
more
some-
reason to take this back to.
Yeah.
Chairman,
And discuss it.
I believe we should.
Mr. Chairman, Bernie Flynn, we do have up until the 25th of June to come together with refreshing this outdated ordinance or article that's on the screen right now. Ms. Camp said she's going to refresh that to make all the dates and everything else make sense to everybody. That's what that. I will do my best. Yeah, well, it's clear if you go to, if you go to Yale or you go to Harvard or you go to Penn State. I went to Williamson Trade School and I can't read it. And it should be able to be read by everyday people. So, and Mr. Schleifer, the reason why I asked it to be put back on discussion is because I couldn't understand it. So the dates were out of sequence with me. Plus a 15-year lease where we have other options that could be considered for this line. I also like the historic railroad, but it could be either and, not either or, as far as I'm concerned. And I think the committee is capable of doing a lease where everybody could fit on the same two rails, before the deadline's over.
I do have one question, Mr. Flynn, if I may.
I'm not leaving.
What experience does the Rail Restoration Committee have in operating a railroad? And I will say that we have collectively, by this point, almost 200 years of experience on our management team.
The guaranteed, you've driven more spikes than I'll ever drive. I used to collect the spikes when they used to come off the Darby Railroad, and my mother didn't know what I was going to do with them. I didn't know either because I had a bucket full of them. But to answer your question, The concept came to us through our Rail Restoration Committee. In 2014, they started deciding how to do it, how to operate a railroad. They have professionals that we met last election cycle where we rode on their prototype. We saw what their system would look like. We talked about where it could fit into Westchester along with the Westchester Railroad. Those people had quite a bit of experience of running rail. I believe mainly in upstate, like up New York that way, or upstate Pennsylvania, and also in Europe. So that's time for another discussion under a cup of coffee. But the fact is, I want this thing to be tabled to go back and rework so everybody can fit in the same room.
Thank you, everyone. I think we're in agreement. This is going back to committee. So thank you all. Appreciate it. Next to discuss the solicitor attending at the zoning hearing for 211 Dean Street.
There's a representative of the applicant here. I don't know if the council wanted to, if they presented to you last evening. I wasn't clear on what my role was if I was going to the hearing, if I was opposing it, if I was monitoring it. I wasn't clear what my role was, and I just wanted to make sure if I am going to that hearing that I understand that.
Okay, I thought we agreed last evening, correct me if I'm wrong, that we were not going to ask for your attendance at that hearing.
That's what
Had
I
everyone
thought.
recollection?
That was correct. It was regarding the PennDOT study as well as the testimony from Mr. Edwards. So I don't believe we need to send Kristen to the meeting.
Okay.
So did you want somebody from staff to attend? Is that just so they're clear as well?
I don't think we need that.
There's no conditions that the council was looking for the zoning hearing board to impose? Okay. Okay.
Sounded like as long as the proposal doesn't change, between what we just saw and yesterday and the meeting, then, if there's a change to it, then we're going to say, hey, wait a minute,
No, I would show up with the same exhibit last night to the zoning hearing board on Monday and present the same way.
Ms. Camp, we were informed last night that the zoning hearing board can put on their own conditions if they wanted to put on their own conditions. And we felt after we didn't understand in smart growth, the drawings, like right there, we kind of like didn't understand that kind of stuff. So that's why we originally asked that you go. But Mr. Denny Howe came last night and showed us photographs of exactly what was going to happen, and it made a lot more sense. And then Mr. Edwards verified the PennDOT site triangle, and we just felt comfortable with it.
Okay. Well, these guys got a good civics education tonight sitting through this meeting, but, and I do want to tell them, because I think it's important, there are 3 other hearings that evening for short-term rentals. So I would recommend that you contact Art Sagner, the solicitor, even though it was advertised at 6 p.m. Oh, Mr. Nagel knows this. There are other hearings that precede you, so maybe can avoid another sitting at a meeting for a couple hours. But thank you, council.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to, I guess is now item 3. Discuss approving the resolution for the request of disposal of records by the Westchester Police Department. I asked a question last evening whether this would impact records relative to the traffic studies, traffic warrants, those kinds of things. And thank you, Dana, for contacting, the police department. And the most that the MUTCD was the organization that is in control of those things is 3 years. And these files go back 5. So my question is answered. It does not impact those records. I don't know if there are any additional comments or questions, but mine is resolved.
Okay, one question I may have, Mr. McCoy, is since these records are going to be destroyed, Are they going to be shredded here at the Borough Council where residents can come up? Because we haven't had a shredding party in over 8 years here, that they could come up and participate if a shredding truck is coming. I did ask Mr. Williams that a few years ago, and he looked at the mayor and said, Mayor, if you're willing to pay for it, I'm willing to have it. And that was his comment, I believe. I could be wrong, but somehow it just never transpired. But if we're getting rid of all these documents, if a shredding truck is coming, maybe we could partner that with the residents.
Well, I'm sure they shred by the pound. So we just have to be prepared for that budget.
Well,
Are any of these documents confidential?
yeah, because we promised the residents that we would do.
But not making any promises
Yeah,
yet.
a
We're
shredding
looking
thing
at the
every
cost.
once in a while. Yeah.
So wait, are any of these like documents confidential that they should be, like, not that a shredding event's a bad idea, but that maybe we shouldn't have an event where we're shredding this stuff at the same time as people just showing up and, doing other stuff?
I don't know, we don't know what it is, but I remember that conversation with Mr. Williams and the mayor back, what it was. So, but if we're going to do shredding, maybe we could partner that into an afternoon for residents or something. So,
Okay. So if someone's like to, well, I guess we'll make a motion on this now to approve.
so moved.
We have a second.
Second.
Mr. Metric, please call the question.
Ms. Dorsey?
Yes.
Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Vaccaro?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Mr. Travis?
Yes.
Ms. Shimoni?
Yes.
And Mr. McCoy?
Yes. Okay, next item, discuss the Westchester Borough requirement for the International Code Council certification of trades, electrical, plumbing, and HVAC. This was a question I brought up again last night that I had some concern about this, and I discovered where my confusion is. And I think we need to take this back to committee to clear up the ordinance language, because right now I guess it's, what is it, 54-4 and 72-110. I'm not quoting the whole thing, but it says that the contractor has to provide a valid license from the ICC. And the ICC does not, they don't give licenses. They give well, they only give certifications for inspectors. They give examinations for tradespeople. So what we're saying is that what we want is for the tradespeople to take their examination from the ICC, and that the borough would give them the license based on that. So we need to clean up the language in the ordinance, because the ordinance is not, as it's written, is not correct. So I propose we move that back to committee. It's going to stay as it is for now, but we move it back to committee to discuss changing the language in that ordinance. Anyone have any thoughts or questions about it?
Which question, Mr. McCoy? So the item was originally regarding whether or not we change the requirement, but now the suggestion is that we revise the ordinance, but not change the requirement.
Well, I'm suggesting that the ICC is still the appropriate entity to do that. But what I'm saying is that in looking at it, the ordinance as it's written is just, it's incorrect.
It's inaccurate. Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine with tabling it, putting back to the ACT committee.
Any other questions, comments, public questions? Okay, we will move on to discuss approving the 2025 park programming.
I believe it was Keith Karowski, Director of Parks and Recreation. I can't remember if it was Lisa or Nicole, but I asked for a one. There were 4 programs submitted before the Public Works Committee last week, and in that time between then and now, there were 4 more that we had got agreements upon. I'm asking you to review the documents that were on the files between last night's meeting and today. These are all programs we've run before besides the Learn to Skate program. There are 2 programs that don't have their current COIs because they're waiting for approval before they talk to their insurance companies. This will be a neater and cleaner procedure moving forward. Again, we missed the timeline due to the Rec Commission not having a meeting. I'm working on a SOP to streamline this process. I'm just looking for the recommendation or approval to move forward and go ahead and have the borough manager sign these agreements, and we can start marketing and advertising and take registration.
So I do have some questions.
Sure.
Most of those programs did not have a location. Like, were they going to be at Marshall Square Park? Are they going to be at Hoops? They're going to be at Everhart?
I can tell you right now that the vast majority of these take place at at Hoops Park, because Hoops Park provides us with the facilities we need to run the programs.
So if we can just make sure that those are filled out going forward so we know what
Yes.
parks they're at.
Can do.
And I did see reference to, and I think you mentioned this last night, the 80-20 split.
Yes.
Some of the entities are doing their own registration.
Correct.
And we're doing it for others.
Yes.
How is that determination made, and how do we
Some
make
of
sure there's an honor system?
Sure. Some of the larger companies, like a Soccer Shots, they will ask to do their own registrations because they have more of an online footprint than we do. So they'll ask to do that. To be quite honest with you, I mean, the only thing we can do, and we have done in the past, is to go out and make sure that the registrations that they're telling us are there. If they tell us they have 20 children in a program, we can go out there and count those children, and we have done that. I've worked with this program for numerous years. I would expect and hope that they are being honorable, but it's something we can check on.
Okay, and speaking of Soccer Shots, I saw that one was dated November 2024. So we've had that one for
We've
some
had
time.
that sitting there, but we were waiting for approval from the Rec Commission, and then we had a new Rec Commission member. We've only met once as a Rec Commission since November. We did not have a meeting in December. We had one meeting in January with a new member, which we were kind of breaking in, and then we did not have a meeting in in February, excuse me.
Again, as we discussed last night, I think we need to have a plan, a contingency plan, whether there's a rec meeting or not.
I agree.
Okay. That's it for me.
Any other questions, comments, council? Public questions or comments?
I just have a question about, these all have a cost except for the one in the middle, the Learn to Skate.
It's free. It's a free program.
A free program.
Yeah, you still have to register your child through our registration system to attend the program, but it's free. They're not charging us, so we're not charging the public.
Okay. All right. It's just a public service, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, just like think of like the egg hunt. We don't charge anyone to come to the egg hunt, but the borough is spending money on that. In this case, no one's charging us, so therefore we're not charging anyone else.
But they're using our parks?
They're using our facilities. They're using the macadam, or I should say at Marshall Square Park, they're using the basketball court. At John O'Green, they're using the south side of the park. And then at Bayard Rustin Park, they're using the basketball courts. But there's no current, besides general trash pickup and cleanup, there's no cost associated with those at the moment.
Part of the 80-20 is because we're covering some of our own administrative costs, right? We share in some of the revenue from these other paid programs.
We have, yeah.
So should we be charging something to the Learn to Skate program for using the parks and facilities and so on and so forth, cleanup? It seems like there's an expense to the borough.
It's something I can discuss with them. There's a cost associated that they're putting together to run the program for free to us. So I don't want to call that a wash, but the registration perspective is done online. Now, there is an administrative cost. Of course, we've got to set that up on our online system. I don't know what that figure be off the top of my head, but it's something we can certainly look at before the program starts.
To tack on to Mr. Travis's situation, what do we normally charge to rent one of our parks?
Weekdays, $25, weekends, $75 for a borough resident, $125 for a non-resident.
For a full day?
It's, yeah, if you wanted it from sun up till sundown, it's the same cost, or if you wanted it for 2 hours.
Okay, so to Mr. Travis's point, it's a nominal fee, but it's still a fee. Even though they're putting on a free thing, we're renting we should be renting the space to them to recoup some cost. Your time, you're worth millions to us.
Thank you, sir.
So, but unfortunately, we can only get $75, I think. So, but whatever our rental fee is, I think we should at least have a minimum fee there.
I can speak with the folks, and again, if they would agree to that, if they don't, then again, that's coming from council. So if they don't, then we don't run the program.
Thank you.
Hi, I've met a bunch of you before. I'm Brian Body, and we have a group back here. We're all parents, and then we've talked to a bunch of other parents. And one thing we've learned is that for little kids, like, 5 to 10, there's all these things like soccer shots that come into like my son's preschool. He's going to be a kindergartner starting at Hillsdale this August. And other parents have talked to us. We've realized that there's, for gymnastics, there's, you can go to the YMCA, soccer shots has that, ATA comes into their preschools. But for skateboarding, you're on your own. And all these parents have skateboards, but they don't know how to teach their kid, and like they never try it. And so we're not a for-profit group. We're just a bunch of parents and skaters in town. It's like Tom over here, he used to work at Fairman's forever, and he taught the camps there. So the people who are doing this, it's the crew who does the summer camps at Fairman's, but since they closed down and they used to do private lessons there, there's a hole that doesn't exist anymore. And so we're just saying, hey, if you give us the spot, we're all doing this for free. We're not making any money off of it. Actually, it's like I've already spent $100 out of my own pocket to do this. And we do have some companies providing stuff. We have ProTech sent me a bunch of helmets for kids who don't have it. We have loaner skateboards, so if kids don't have skateboards, we can give that. And if you do want some money afterwards, once we get the approval, we do actually have the skate park project, which used to be Tony Hawk Foundation. They gave us a thing. They have a community activity, like a community resource grant they can give us. And they want to give us one. They said, hey, for this next quarter, we're probably going to miss it now because this has to get voted on. But they like what we're doing because we're giving this, we're just doing this, providing it for a lot of like low income families too. And that's why we're doing it at different parks. And if we do get this grant, part of what we want to do is do some more later on too and get this money. And so if there's some kids who come from like an underserved family who like skateboarding, be like, hey, that loaner board and that helmet, keep it. We're just trying to, we're giving our own time. It's our own time and effort because we all love skateboarding. I'm 53 with a 5-year-old. I went skating I took my son to the Wilmington skate park at 7th Street Skate Park today. And he even asked me why it takes so long to build a skate park. I'm like, I don't know. But we're just trying to provide, I'm the only person out, granted, I live across the street on Bradford Avenue, so I'm technically East Bradford, but I used to work at Gay Street Vendor right across the street in Produce Junction. I graduated from Henderson in '89. I used to pump gas at BP. And I moved back during the pandemic to help take care of my parents. And I'm just trying to help give back to Westchester because so many things are getting cut back. There's budget cuts everywhere. I know Keith has been having problems with budgets and whatnot. So we're like, we'll do it. We'll do it for free. We'll clean up. We'll leave it cleaner than we got there. We're just, we're volunteering our time and our abilities just to help hopefully get some other kids as excited about skateboarding as we are.
Thank you.
So-
What you're doing is awesome. I'm
Yeah.
fine with us doing it free, but if others want, then,
I just have one question, Mr. Mr. McCoy, the other M. Who's covering the insurance? Like if a child gets hurt in the park, there's a cost for the insurance.
Yeah. Well, in the parks, there's already, like if you get hurt on the playground, there's already insured. Like we talked to Keith, we can get our own COI, but there's going to be waivers and it's going to be like, skate at your own risk because it's inherent. It's like an inherent thing where it's like just that with part of, skateboarding, it's no.
That's the question.
Yeah. But yes, we have talked about, I know he did say we do have to get a COI, but we talked to the person who we got when we did a pop-up a few years ago. And it's like, they don't want to write a policy until we get the approval, because then, we're just spending money on to cancel it. So
Yeah, we do have, Brian, we do have requirements for insurance.
yeah, yep.
Yeah, and I talked about my fat ass last week.
Mhm.
That's exactly how I described it.
Yeah.
Because now I'm old. I
Mhm.
hit my head first, then my ass.
Mhm.
Kids hit their head, then their back.
Yep.
And I'm really concerned about, the helmets.
Yeah.
And the, the potential for injury.
Yeah.
Of course, Ms. Vaccaro told me that, her kids played football and they had,
Yeah.
helmets on and all that good stuff. But if the insurance portion of it is pretty important.
Yeah.
So I take it that the COI is forthcoming. You guys are working on that.
Program, we won't run a program without COI.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah. But we couldn't get it until it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. We couldn't get so. If you have any questions about what we want, because we just want to have the only thing we're going to have is just not like a lot of ramps, just like little pump bumps, like things like 14 inches high, and most of it just for kids who've never skated before, just learn how to step on them. And we also want to have parent interaction. So we're also not just teaching kids, we're teaching parents how to teach their kids. So.
Thank you. So
Okay.
any other comments? Do people want to stick with the rental fee with this, or are we going to approve as it's presented? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Will somebody make a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Metric, please call the question.
Ms. Dorsey? Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Vaccaro?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Mr. Travis?
Yes.
Ms. Shimoni?
Yes.
And Mr. McCoy?
Yes. Okay, and
Mr. McCoy, I have the one item.
yes, we're talking about the HARB item that was number 16C, 2025-06, 120 North Church Street, the new dining platform.
Yes, thank you very much. What was actually on the approval from HARB last night was and I want to make perfectly clear so the people that own Turk's Head Wine are not under the misrepresentation that Borough Council approved them to put the platform out there. The HARB approval is just a aesthetic and construction approval, and HARB approved that. And then it has to come back to full council for approval for the platform. We confirmed that with administration today, but I wanted to make sure the council understood it was basically for aesthetics and for building. And also, if you look at the plan, the platform actually extends way past the end of the building. So I'm hoping that's just a design flaw, trying to fit all those tables in there. Jeff, want to move it down a little bit the other way? So, way past the building. So it also looks like it's wrapping around the building, which is not on the plan.
So is the ordinance though to the property line? or
The
to
way the
building?
ordinance reads, it's from the edge of your building, well, your space that you own,
The property
the
line.
property line to the other end. You can't extend past the building. Like, for example, where Mikado, he was taking the entire street on Market Street. He went from alley to alley.
No, I get this, but
Yeah.
I don't know if that property line is roughly the middle
Well,
of the
it's,
street.
no,
or-
that's your building, the size of your building. You can't go outside the footprint of your building.
Where do you see it? I'm probably not reading this properly.
All right,
Is it that one place that looks like it's little stairs and tables?
No. That's out in the street. It's when they look like little stars.
Oh, the stars. Okay.
Yeah, the stars. Yeah, you can't go outside the footprint of your building. So you have to start where it says public walkway, down towards the bottom where it's real black on the line. And you can't go past the steps going down basically down steps or
Well,
whatever.
at this point, I mean, it sounds like the process is a little bit reversed because we're not talking about giving them a platform tonight, which
No.
is what you're talking about.
Right.
We're talking about the fact that it's simply a HARB approval.
Right, and council's only approving the harbor approval for aesthetics and for appropriateness.
And I'm fine with that. So it's still got to go back to smart growth for the
Yep.
approval of the
It
platform.
does,
Which
yeah.
will probably be what, next month,
I guess.
right?
What, Ramsey?
Yes, it's not until next month.
I am Allison.
So before Allison begins, I just want to take some responsibility here because obviously this is not my forte, these platforms. So I did not realize that after HARB council then approved it, I thought that the building department would approve the building permit application of it where we review, the distance and all of that. So, it's my fault that Allison is here because she was under the impression as well that we would be approving tonight. We sort of talked over email today, but I just want to be clear that I did not understand that. I do think in April in Smart Growth, we will be discussing this ordinance and policy because I think it's very confusing.
It's very confusing.
But I wanted to take responsibility for that. I don't know
Yeah,
if you
no,
have
thanks,
to say
Ramsey.
on the-
Yeah, I do. So by way of introduction, Allison Owen, I'm the owner of Turk's Head Wines, and obviously lease the space at 120 North Church. The process has been extremely confusing. I promise I'm not stupid. I have done many contracts and negotiations and read through many, many things. I have been extremely proactive in having conversations, not just with Ramsey, but with Dana, with who else in the borough? Wendy, as well as Sally, dating back to January of this year, trying to be very clear on the process because I know that these things, if we don't present them correctly the first time, they get delayed. I was told multiple different ways from Sunday the process I had to follow. Obviously, the first thing was getting the structure approved by HARB, which we did. The next step in the process, I was told was going to then go to the Smart Council meeting. I was out of town last week, was not able to be there. And that the application I needed to approve through the technology platform that Sean referred to, which is, that was interesting comment earlier, but there was nowhere for me to actually submit now some of the things that Ramsey notified me at 1:45 today that I needed to submit as part of the process. As far as the parking spots and the reason why this particular drawing is a little confusing is the parking spots in front of our building are shifted. So my understanding is I am not allowed to lease the first parking spot where the car is on the, if you wouldn't mind scrolling, that I'm not allowed to lease the first, oh, sorry, up a little. Yep, right there. That parking spot there where that car is in front of Twin Valley Coffee. So was bound to the two parking spots behind it. The second parking spot towards the back does encroach on the building next door. So I actually had the metal fabrication company that had designed the platform to make it shorter. So although I'd be leasing two parking spots, the platform would actually be less than 40 feet to not encroach on that. The property line, I did not know that it couldn't go beyond the building. Just to be clear, the property line, based on my relationship with my landlord, actually does go to where the two tables are on the side alley that we have depicted. If you could scroll back up, I'm sorry, or zoom out, either way. So the two tables up by the staircase that are there in that alley, that is actually part of my lease and my outdoor agreement with J-Lo. And our property line actually goes to the building that is depicted there at the top. So I am happy to revise this. I'm happy to fix it. Obviously, this is a really important project for us in our business to be able to provide outdoor dining since we're not on Gay Street. I already paid the $3,700 to the borough and have deposits, out obviously to, the various folks that I'm partnering with, because obviously expediting this is extremely important to us and having outdoor seating to serve our customers. So if somebody can clearly tell me exactly what I need to do, I'm happy to follow the rules to make sure that this gets approved in a quick manner. So
I think there is precedent that we did a couple years ago, in which case one of the restaurant owners or whatever got permission from the store next to them. And I believe that was over on Walnut Street at that particular time?
With the dry cleaner, probably.
That would be
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
Right. So there already is that precedent to do that. And I understand, I'm very familiar. If you go down to where the cars are in the live picture,
Yeah.
you can see that it is.
Yeah, it's weird because like where the alley is next to Twin Valley Coffee's side of the building, Prescott Alley. I don't think I have pictures of it on here, but there's almost room for a parking spot, but there is no parking spot. So the 3 parking spots that are in front of 120 North Church are all kind of shifted in a weird direction, which basically would limit me to 1 parking spot, which really doesn't justify spending the money based on the revenue that my business would achieve. So I did get, I know you asked for this, there was nowhere to submit it. Again, a process flaw, but I do have signature from Ned, who owns the Colonial Metal right next to us, and shared with him our plan. I mean, obviously, I don't want my guests sitting on a platform in front of his business, and neither does he. So although I'd be leasing those 2 parking spots, I did have the metal fabricator actually come out and readjust it to 32.5 feet from 40 feet. So it is bumping a little bit further in and not sitting in front of another business's front door.
I also just
So,
note, so
I
one of
don't-
the conversations last week that I think is on the consent agenda is the fee resolution, right? So we've changed it now, so because we're gonna start pulling the meters, that it would actually be linear feet instead of per parking.
So will it be
space.
less than $3,700?
I am not good at math, but I will make sure that you're whole, however.
No, I'm not worried about it.
So I think that would, take care of the concern of the parking space itself. It could go to the end of the property line. It wouldn't have to be a full space.
Okay.
Are there any other questions related to the HARB?
Not to the harm. So when it comes back to smart growth, we'll go over the actual footprint you're allowed to be at.
Okay.
And because the other retailers or restaurants in the borough are now being held to the proper width of the buildings. And we want to make sure we stay consistent because we have a new director or that's taking on this.
I wasn't aware. Congrats.
Yeah. And she's here now, so it's the chair.
And that probably caused a lot of confusion with me too
Yeah.
throughout the entire process because I was, meeting with as many people to cross every T and dot every I. So this would get approved this evening. And clearly there was major
Well, the
miscommunication.
harbor's not a problem.
Oh, no, I know that. But to get here, to get this approved.
Yeah.
So there was, I think, some miscommunication that has now delayed. So as you can imagine, the investment to build these metal platforms
It's a fortune.
is a fortune, as well as the furniture, because if you've seen the aesthetic of our place, I'm not buying picnic tables. So, it is quite the investment, and to make sure that there's a business case tied to it to enable us to have these 40 seats to capture the revenue, to provide this, to the borough and to everyone that's coming into town to visit us, I think, would be valuable. So I don't know. So April, we did- we have to wait until
Yeah.
April.
Is smart growth.
Okay.
Or then I.
So,
check with you.
okay.
There's
right.
there's nothing worse than thinking you know what the rules are until you don't.
Well, especially when you ask a lot
Yeah. And I
and
really
you're
could-
given misinformation. So
Yeah,
that's a
so
very frustrating process.
Ramsey understands and the program now. So hopefully you two can,
Okay.
work out whatever it is before you come to smart.
All right. So we'll have basically a 4-week delay. Okay. All right, it is what it is.
Ramsey is good at anything, it's cleaning stuff up. So I have every confidence that this will happen in April.
Thank you. Love your facility, by the way. So I will look forward to sitting outside.
Yeah,
Prove it.
let me just say, I was there on Friday night for the chocolate and wine event. Yeah, and it was great, yes. Learned a little bit about your history and starting your business up and everything, and respect, man, respect. Let's get you, make sure you.
So we're going to approve this and separately from the rest on the
Yes.
consent.
Well, I just make a motion, put it back on consent.
Yeah, well, one or the other. Yeah, it's hard.
All right, move it to consent.
Yeah.
And next we have consent.
Mr. McCoy, I'd like to make a motion that we approve everything that's on consent.
I will second that.
Mr. Metric, please call the question.
Ms. Dorsey?
Yes.
Mr. Flynn?
Yeah.
Ms. Vaccaro?
Yes.
Mr. McGinnis?
Yes.
Travis?
Yes.
Ms. Shimoni?
Yes.
And Mr. McCoy?
Yes. Is there any new business? Any other business? Okay, seeing none, we are adjourned at 9:08. Thank you.